Let's get started then. Hello, everybody. Welcome to TST meeting at 20th of August 2024. Before starting, remember that this call is recorded and it's published in social media channels. The first item is an announcement that the problem that we had last week to access the wiki page is solved thanks to Eric. At least I can reach to the Confluence now. I hope everybody can access. There's no problem. The main item in the agenda today is about the Berlin Lab, the maintenance of the Berlin Lab. Previously, as you remember, most of you, we had some problems in Berlin Lab. That some Jenkins pipelines were not working. So BISDN take care of the lab for a while and get some crucial pipelines operational. But we need to have some follow-up works in this lab, especially updating these softwares, the OLT, ONE firmwares, the tools and libraries that we are working in the lab, the networking, etc. So for this, we prepared a scope of work with TST and board. The scope of work with the help of the BISDN, actually. So the scope of the work is the items that I listed in agenda. Mostly, configuring the lab again, documenting it, finding the replacement parts, and install them again, install new software and firmware on the OLTs and ONT devices we have. And basically getting operational these DT and Türk Telekom workflows, and the workflows that defined by TST needs to be running before the releases, etc. So basically, getting the lab totally operational, working. So John he requested from us to define some acceptance criteria or work on some, talk on some acceptance criteria in this TST meeting. So I'm returning to you, John. I mean, what questions do you have? And what items do you want to clarify?
Thank you for the introduction. So I think the main goal of putting this on the agenda here is to reduce the amount of email ping pong that we're playing with the offers going back and forth that we've done for like a bit over a year now, I guess. And to come to like a final version of what is it that is actually needed, and like what is the criteria that the board and the TST can use to judge if this is actually fulfilled or not. I guess the catalog of things that needs to be done is more or less taken from BISDN's initial offer from about a year ago. But we have been discussing that over and over and over again, and I have a feeling like we need to somehow clarify a bit what is it that needs to be finished here. I think like some of the points are more or less clear, like I guess the lab bill of material inventory network diagram and stuff like that. I think this is like detailed enough. But then there's other things that leave a lot of space for interpretation. I guess the biggest part here is all of these testing pipelines related things. All of these 4 points, workflow testing for DT, workflow testing for TT, testing pipeline for nightly, and testing pipelines for upstream, stay activated and running. So there is no real definition to be found anywhere about like what exactly are those pipelines and what does activated and running in the end mean really, because there's a lot of different pieces that need to come together, right? So the first thing is obviously those pipelines should be possible to start, and then it would be good if they would succeed in the end. But we already, like for a long time now, have the situation where even if they show green, that is mostly because somebody added or true to the end of the scripting, and then it's actually always green, right? The other part is like, which pipelines should those be? Because most of the other points around that now refer only to the physical infrastructure in the Berlin lab. And to my knowledge, the pipelines for nightly testing and for upstream patches would be running on the AWS infrastructure, which is, at least from these points mentioned here, completely out of scope. So that would be kind of hard to bring those things together. So we definitely need some more clarification on how all of these things should come together. And then there's other pieces that are, I guess, just missing some more details, which is, for example, this reference OLT model and ONU model defined by TST. So I think that it would be cool if that could be defined by the TST, and then we can just add that and see that this is an acceptance criteria, that those things that are defined here are upgraded and fully functional. I guess we can skip the part of defining in detail what upgraded and fully functional means. We don't need to overdo the full thing, but at least wherever it's like a bit unclear what exactly is meant here, it would be cool if we could define some acceptance criteria for those so that we're talking about the same things.
Yeah, sure. Let's go one by one. So for the pipelines, the workflow testing of DT, TT, nightly testing, and upstream patches. So as you said, all workflows should be, related to the Berlin lab, actually. So you're right that there are some Deutsche Telekom pipelines that are working, more than one, and a few Türk Telekom workflows working there on Berlin lab on hardware. The nightly testing, most of them, as you said, are running on AWS with simulators, but these Deutsche Telekom and Türk Telekom workflows, some of them also activated nightly. So this nightly test actually covering these ones also. So it's this one is we can skip this one. This is the content of these nightlies are already covered in this too. But for patches, upstream patches, the default upstream patch tests are simulator ones, as you said, but also if you type, like hardware test onto the patch as a comment, then it, triggers a hardware test on Berlin lab. This part is the one that's related to the lab. So it needs to be, cleared. So this one is valid, I can say. The acceptance about upgrade about the devices, we have two different devices, actually 3 different devices in the lab, H-Core, Zyxel, and Atras currently. I guess Atras is taking care of upgrade about, its OLTs. But probably you may, request their perhaps last software or firmware to upgrade the OLT, Atran OLT, but the Zyxel Edge Core ones, we need to upgrade them actually. But this STST, we need to, talk with them and, take the last firmware versions from them to install on the devices. This part is on us, but upgrading them is on you. So for ONUs, we again have, Zyxel ONUs and I guess some alpha ONUs. I think we have 2 or 3 kinds of ONUs there. Needs to be upgraded actually. In ONU part, we need to check if we need some upgrade there or not. Probably we don't actually. Because in OLT side, we need to upgrade the OLTs with the new versions of VOLTHA. But if the ONU is, working fine with the current software release, then there's no need to upgrade them. That's all we have currently. I think you also, know the number of ONUs and OLTs ballpark we have in the lab. If you want, we can put all of the list into the, offer or, or mention their names.
So I think like for the pipelines, that would definitely be a good thing if you could just like list the pipelines, so the workflow things that you think should succeed, especially if you now say that we should remove the nightly testing pipelines from this list here. And for the OLT and the ONU models, you mentioned that some of those things you would like to do yourself or Atran would like to do. So the more people that are working on this, the more complicated this whole definition becomes, right? Because I mean, Atran offered an insane amount of help like last year when we were trying to get through all of these things. That was really cool. But obviously, Atran does not have the needed physical access to do all of the upgrading and all this part. So we tried to work with them, and then the TST basically said, no, we don't want Atran to be upgraded here. We want to focus on the other models. So we can definitely go back to like working with these parts there, working with Atran, working with Edge Core, all those things. But we need to define like what is the criteria by we will be judged that we will be judged later by, right? So because otherwise it becomes really complicated when in the middle of the work somebody is changing the goals. I think we had that last year, and that didn't lead necessarily to a lot of happiness on all sides. And I would really like to avoid that here by defining a clear goal, especially since we have been asked by quite a lot of people to focus the work on the minimal needed and give an offer that is as low as possible because the budget is super tight. So I would need to know the exact things that I need to write in here to give you this offer.
And Francisco, I've got to check which OLT is the prime candidate. Is there one that works today without any upgrades or anything?
Sorry, Francisco, come again?
Are there any OLTs, whether it be Atran or Zyxel, are there any of those that today is integrated up and running and doesn't need any upgrades, firmware upgrades, or any work? Is there anything already running that we should focus on from an OLT point of view?
Actually, the Edge Core and Zyxel ones and the Atran also is working fine, but their software, their version, agent version is too old. It's still VOLTHA 2.10. We had some extra edits in VOLTHA agent, so need to upgrade it. In order to upgrade the agent, we need to, put it into the Debian of the, full package of the OLT and upgrade it. That's the main reason we need to upgrade the OLTs. So
okay, but
all of them, I think, needs upgrade. I'm not sure about the Atran one. Because the upgrade of the Atran was, taken care by the Atran guys somehow previously.
But should
But
we
maybe to
we-
like quickly add on this answer here of all of them are working fine. I mean, maybe a lot of stuff was fixed since like BISDN stopped working there, but the last state that I have seen is that the management interface of the Zyxel loses like complete connectivity at least once a week and then needs to be hard rebooted. The Edge core was last identified to have hardware issues and be an alpha or beta model of the whole thing and not working probably. I think like we managed to somehow get it to work with a lot of tweaks here and there, but that's very far away from stable. And the Atron one was not working at all because we needed to, there was still an outstanding upgrade for the firmware and probably also for the agent. And it was completely unclear if after all of those things, anything would be working. So my perspective would be very far away from all of them are working.
Yeah, got your point. Yeah, you're right. They're not too stable. I agree with that. But at least let's think it this way. So these are the current devices we have in our lab. So in this way or that, we need to fix the problems that they have if they're fixable, or not. We need to add new devices to that. But I don't know if we have any other devices. I know that some Redis devices shipped from.
No. It was a simpler question than that, Mahir. It was a question of should we be doing any upgrades in the SIBA, the VOLTHA software, and the firmware of the OLTs, or should we be getting the test pipelines to work first with what we have? I don't know which way it would be working best, right? But for me, I would much rather focus on this is the best, the most stable OLT supplier that will provide us the effort, and we focus on that single one first, get the pipelines all running, activated, workflows all running, activated, and then we worry about the other OLTs.
Got it. Yeah, I mean the only OLT that we can work on is the Zyxel one, I guess. Then, Jan, do you have any idea on which OLT we can use for tests?
So from my current
perspective,
none of the ones that are in the lab seem particularly stable. But for all of the models that are there were some promised upgrades, updates, all of those things. So I would hope that if we're through with that work, at least the Zyxel one should be stable enough to run the testing on. The EdgeCore one does not seem like a good candidate because, as said, it's alpha hardware or something like that. I'm not sure anymore what exactly the word was that EdgeCore used there. And then for the Atran one, at least from all that I heard from Atran, that should be pretty stable as well. But obviously, this is not the complete open source whatever spirit there, but as well, like we might not need to necessarily test the openness of the OLT itself, because I guess the idea is to test VOLTHA and not so much if the OLT is fine. So I guess the Atran one and the Zyxel one seemed fine, but there's still a lot of work that needs to go into those to like make them stable, I guess, or make them usable for testing.
Yeah. Okay.
So the problem with the Atran is, True Telecom workflows does not work, never test on Atran devices. So, but the Zyxel devices are open and white box, and both DT and True Telecom workflows work on this device. So,
okay.
we
So
can.
Manuel's got his hand up, but from my point of view, I would suggest we just focus on Zyxel, work with them to get any support we might need, and then worry about it. But Manuel, you have something to say?
Yeah, Manuel, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Hope you can hear me now. So yeah, I think from the perspective of having a solution that works, also a solution that is open and more generally available to the community, and of course in support of the open source reference adapter. I guess that is something that should be prioritized and preferred. Of course, if there are other solutions, then those can be added and supported by by a case by case basis. But in order to really keep it focused, I would support excluding this from the integration activity and really just focus on the the model that the TST, of course, then concludes upon. But everything else can be supported on with own resources, meaning resources by interested parties that are wanting to see this hardware.
Okay, then I agree on that.
Basically, in summary, supportive for the OpenOLT reference model. If that's a cycle, then I think that sounds good.
Okay, if you're okay also with that, then I mean I'm okay. So I can put this onto the document, the OLT vendor and model that we have. So I mean,
I have one comment on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be good to put there, but I think we should check with the vendors as well, right? Because I think last time we had an issue where the vendors were not willing to support, right? So because if we need a new firmware from Zyxel, again, because we need to upgrade the agent, right? So we have to get the Debian package from them, and they should be willing to support us, right? Because if that doesn't work, then maybe so at least for now, the two candidates are Zyxel, because Edgecore, as Jan is also saying, that the hardware itself is pretty old and they're not willing to support us. And the other is I think the Radisys OLTs, right? I think they are also in the Berlin lab. So I think we should check with both of them, and whoever is willing to support us, we can choose either of the two.
Yeah, I was about to bring that point as well. So we also have to check this out, as Amit said, like whether Zyxel will be willing to support any issues faced. So I had offered help with respect to the ROLT to provide support, and also we had tried to ship them from the original ONF where it was probably in Menlo Park. Now they are probably in Germany, but I'll try to find it out and see if they are installed in Berlin lab. But
And
yeah,
the same goes to Radisys, right? Abhilash, Amit. If Radisys, and I'm speaking with a LF broadband hat here, not a Radisys hat. If Radisys are prepared to put the effort to support the use of the Radisys OLT, fine. But it's implicit that Zyxel and Adtran have to support that, otherwise there's no bets here, right? So let's be honest and in the what's the goal here? The goal is to get this up and running, and we must get it up and running with one OLT that fits the DT and TT workflows first and foremost. Which one? Honestly, I don't care. If Radisys as a community member has the effort, the willingness, the skills to help with that OLT in the Berlin lab, let's make sure that BISDN or whoever gets chosen gets that. And if it's Zyxel, I'm already on the message to Zyxel to make sure that's the case. I think between Manuel and I, we can also make a request to Adtran to support this activity. But to be clear, we pick one, get that one working first, and then we worry about the others. Whichever one is the best, most stable, more support, Jan, that will be your decision to make.
Yeah, Francisco. So that's what I was also implying, that we check with the vendors. And maybe the way we could go about it is, because the Excel thing is already installed and we had run it in the past, we first check with the Excel. If they say, yeah, we will give you the Debian packages and things like that, then we just work with the Excel, right? If not, maybe then we check with Radisys.
So maybe to add here from the experience from last year, because I think all of the discussions with all of the vendors had not really continued. So BISDN last year during our contract started the discussions with all of these vendors again in regards to support for the OLTs in the lab. So we talked to Edgecore, we talked to Zyxel, we talked to Adtran about the possibility to support the lab there and to get some assistance. And the feedback that we got like from EdgeCore was that it's not generally their case anymore, but they at least provided some possible update path. From Zyxel, we did not get too much, apart from last release that was tested with was like 5 years ago or something. But if there is a big interest from the telcos, they would obviously be willing to participate again. And Atran was really the biggest supporter there. They offered a lot of hands-on support, and they offered to directly jump in. They participated in the calls. I think nobody from the others showed up ever on a call there. So Atran was definitely the one that was supporting the most. So from that perspective, although I haven't worked with their OLTs because TST said no, I think they supported this whole thing. So just to keep that in mind. And then obviously the readiness thing, I guess, might be easy. It's the only thing against the readiness thing there is that it is not in any test pipeline at the moment. So using those would not only mean adding them to the lab, but also recabling a lot of stuff, redefining all of the testing plans so that that matches the port and all of this configuration, and then verifying that all of these things are working on a currently broken setup, right? So this is a bit more complicated, and then will probably blow up a bit the amount of work that we need to do there.
Manuel, we got your hand up again.
Yeah, but waiting for the floor. So, am I here? Is it fine?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
yeah,
please.
just wanted to follow up, and thanks much, Jan, for this additional information from your experience last year. So I think the general approach has not changed, right? The community is open to further additions. At least that's what I think it should be, right? Anybody can continue to add hardware to the test bed, provided that they also support the integration. And I think there we need to draw a line between what is possible in general, and all of these OLTs could be added, and ideally, I mean, they would be added again, since there were multiple models working in the past, and this has been very, very, of course, a very strong case and ideal. But what we are discussing in terms of the statement of work, and of course the TST is in full charge of this, but I would say there we need to look at at least one option, which in the best case is also supported by a hardware supplier, so that the extra effort by the Linux Foundation broadband community is minimized. So in other words, if there is supplier support for a reference model, then that is even better than having a reference model without supplier support. The minimum would be that, of course, there's openness to provide support, at least to a third party, also to operate the OLT or OLTs. And the ideal case is that the supplier provides hardware support and integration support. So that being said, again, in summary, I think any model can be added and should be able to be added at any time, provided there is support from the community, is from those people who would like to bring it in and see it. But what we are discussing here is, I think, the minimum of having at least one working end-to-end setup, meaning one OLT model and multiple ONUs, from the best fitting, easiest, most stable, easy to integrate hardware model. And if that is supported by the supplier, that is even better. Then we can exclude this effort from the effort that BISDN needs to take, or whoever actually supports the Linux Foundation broadband with this effort. So we are actually looking for this ideal scenario, right? So I mean, does this make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, if you're saying that the new OLTs needs to be added to the system, yes, of course. But on the other hand, if you mention that, or try to say that this the effort that needs to add these OLTs needs to be covered by community. I'm not sure this is the case currently. I mean, if you go wait for the community to implement the new pipelines, for example, when we attach the Redises to the system, then we cannot put some acceptance to the document for BISD and all other companies. So because they will be dependent to the community to write the new pipelines, etc. Of course, it is the ideal scenario, but for current case, I think, I mean, BISDN or any company that will do this need to cover these efforts.
I want to chime in here, Mahir. So I'm okay if we have the Atran OLT up and running. It would be good. So more the best, actually. But the problem with the Atran is their software is not fully open source, like the adapter and also the agent side. So if we want to start a new feature or start a new bug fix, then we cannot fix those parts if the software is in their closed source side. So for testing, hardware testing, yes, it is good to have the Atran OLT, but if we try to add new features, then some of the features will not be in the Atran OLT if they don't support. So we cannot those new features in the Atran OLT.
Okay,
That
so
is the
from the approach of getting the pipelines working, it's okay. But when we upgrade to the new features in the VOLTHA community, the latest versions, the Atran one would not be good enough. Is that what you mean, Sir Kent?
yes. In summary, yes. Right.
This is one point, and the other point is we're not testing the actual whole community code on Atran, because the thing that we're working on Atran is some parts of VOLTHA, and they have their own OLT instead of our open OLT, and they have their own agent instead of our agent. So we cannot test agent and open OLT on their devices.
Okay, guys. So I think we'd agree that if Zycel is prepared to support, we go with Zycel here, right? If Zycel does not, then we need to rethink.
Yeah, rethink for Redises, perhaps.
Yeah, could be Redises. Okay.
Yeah. So Atran would be a good to have. If not, yeah.
Okay.
But one with OpenOLT is a must.
Yeah, Abhilash and Amit, would you? Well, let's have a huddle internally, right? I think we need to check with our team if we can. Assume that there's a Redises OLT already in Berlin, but if there is, we also need resources, and I can't help with the resources. So would you mind going back and thinking, Robert and I, as to whether we could offer resources, and then we can make that offer available to the TST. Unfortunately, Peter Duknat is on holidays, but I'll drop the guys an email in Zycel to ask for their support directly, and I'll let the TST know what responses I get.
Yeah, friend, I had done this already. I think so. I spoke to Deb and Dipanjan as well on this, and they agreed to support. So we will be supporting as part of TST. I'll be supporting for that one. So sorry for the Redises.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Abhilash. Robert here. I joined. Sorry for being late.
Hi, Robert. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I think we have a consensus here to use Zycel first, and if you cannot get support from Zycel, then we will go with Redises devices.
Yeah, and did you have a list? I don't know if you sent a list of questions that you wanted to clarify, or if you intended on presenting your plan and dates and deliverables to the TST. But that I think the focus is to make sure that you're happy, you have all the answers. Have you got what you need?
So I mean, like just for reference here, the thing that we've been discussing now for 20 minutes, this reference OLT model and ONUs, is obviously important, but in the end, I mean, this is I think we calculated with about 2 weeks of effort out of this whole thing, and I guess if we reduce the models of the OLTs here and change it a bit, it might, instead of 10 days, it's only 8 or something. We still need to go through all those things, upgrade them. So, but yeah, sure. I mean, we reduced it by 2 days, maybe.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of
discussion for me
additional
wasn't-
things here in regards to the workflows and the testing pipelines. I guess Mahir promised to like send around a list of the exact pipelines. The other things, I guess the important part is that the TST and the board are synced up on what exactly is needed to focus the work here, right? So I guess most of the stuff that is like shown on screen here, and obviously all of the stuff that is in our offer, has already been written by BSDN and then been used by the TST to like go through this SOW. So what I would really like to do here is to get a consensus from the people in the TST on these points, so that we know that the TST wants these points. And I think there's a lot of people from the board here as well. So it would be great if those people from the board could like ask the necessary questions that they think are open for discussion. I think there was a bunch of things in terms of, do we really need that? Should we define that closer? So I'm fine with this list, but I've iterated over this list for the last year. So the acceptance criteria here, I guess, is all of those things should be done, and ideally in the end, the pipelines should have been running. I think for the points that I asked, like the pipelines and the OLT models, we have a bit closer definition. But then there is all of these other things that are really, I think, open for discussion in terms of what does it mean that the installation, startup, shutdown, recovery process are documented, stable, and repeatable. We have an interpretation for that. We sent you an offer. We sent you a bunch of offers, actually, with different like definitions of all of those things. If there is anything that the TST thinks here is a good acceptance criteria that should be added, I would love to hear that for all of those points.
Yeah, we basically, Jan, we added, at the bottom of, this page, we added a few acceptance criteria, not much. As you said, the main goal is here to, upgrade all the softwares and libraries and tools, etc. you previously, defined, basically. So bring the software on and the hardware in a good condition, and see that the Deutsche Telekom and Türk Telekom workflows that we will list in this, document, we want to see them green, working, fine, and we also want all the setup, documented well with all of the configurations, so that it will be maintainable, So as an acceptance, yes, we want to see this workflows, defined workflow green, running, stable. But as you said, perhaps
So
pipeline, we need to talk on them and, define some criteria on TSTs for them to be green. As you said, perhaps some ORs needs to be changed to ends, but I don't think we can list them on this document. We need to, define all this on the next TSTs when you start to work on these pipelines, etc.
So maybe to, yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, seeing these pipelines green and stable is the, main acceptance criteria for us, and a maintainable environment, an up-to-date environment that you can demonstrate to us and show the documents about that environment. These are the other acceptance criteria that we defined. So the other thing, the missing replacement parts, etc., giving you a gap, a place for you to, when you start to work on these items, you may see some, extra problematic areas, etc. And on TST, perhaps we, discuss on that, and that would be covered by you or, you know, community. So these extra items that not clear enough, I mean, they therefore, you know, these kind of things give you a space, you know, for other possible problems that we may, you know, face with.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally appreciate this idea of like defining the scope only to a certain point and not into like all exact technical details. But so this is basically the exact problem that like BISDN and specifically like the people here like Jokin and myself that have been facing in the last year is we send an offer for the full work to get everything back up to running, and then over and over again through the period of the last year we have basically been asked to do the full work more or less, but super focused and only for a third of the amount that we offered, like in terms of the payment, right? And the question now is like, how do you see that happening? Because we need to cut something, but if you want us to cut something, we need to define what can be left out, and we cannot have those more vague things anymore. Because otherwise I mean, I'm happy to go back to the original offer and just like go with that, because that included all of those things. That included all of the different tasks that we needed to do, and that included some extra space to fix some things on the way that we discovered. But if we want to cut it down to a third of the amount, then we need to kick out things, right? And which things do you want to kick out here? And this is the thing that we've been discussing for a year now. And I would really like to conclude that, because we cannot continuously go in circles about, we would like you to do the full work, but we are only willing to pay a third of what you're asking.
So, Manuel, first I see that you raised your hand.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Jan makes a good point. And what I don't think that for say one pipeline or a set of pipelines that TST defines and uses as acceptance criteria, that then there you know, that there is something where it is too limited in terms of the achievements. So I think rather what would make sense is to try to reduce overall the say the horizontal scope, right? The vertical scope is make things work end to end. At least like the TST prioritized pipelines on at least one hardware set. You know, set of hardware means in the minimum case one OLT and one ONU, right? If that allows running running again one full test and trigger it by pipeline or by you know, by manual step. So I think that's a leading thought, is not to take away from this end-to-end nature that a pipeline is green, but actually given the constraints, it will not be possible to have all pipelines should be green, and all possible efforts that you know, would ever be done, and automation and everything would be done in one shot. So the first shot needs to be the one that really sits, and make sure that the testing for the TST defined priority model and pipeline or pipelines works. And I think that's the scope focus that we are looking at.
Yeah, and the items that we take out of the original offer was, I think the biggest part was the AWS upgrade and AWS test, you know, simulator tests, etc. There's a huge bunch of tests running there, actually, for verification, for nightly jobs, for scale, etc. All left out of the, you know, out of the content. So we currently only focused on the hardware pipelines lab, and I think we also limited here the ONUs now and OLTs. As Manuel said, we can also limit the ONU number of ONUs that needs to be integrated, because there are more than, I think, around 8-10 ONUs connected to the system, but not much of them used in the test. But we can limit them with 2 ONUs and 1 OLT if needed. So we already, agreed here that we will go for only 1 OLT now, and we can limit also ONU numbers to 2 if that makes sense to you, Ian. So
okay. So looking at these points here again that are defined, I appreciate that you already basically said that we take out the AWS part. And taking the AWS part out is a great thing, but it's obviously not the large chunk of work, right? Because AWS in the end is starting a bunch of new virtual machines, installing the same simulation software and then running on the same simulation software. So that's obviously still work, and it's quite a lot of work. But in contrast to working on the hardware setup, and I guess you all know why this hardware setup is pretty important, AWS is rather simple. Still a lot of work, but I guess that's something that can also be covered by the community. So I appreciate that we take it out here. And then if we look at those points that we have here, most of them are not specific to the number of OLTs or ONUs that you're testing, right? So if we talk about the lab bill of material, that has nothing to do with how many OLTs or ONUs you have. Then installation, startup, shutdown, and all of those things, still independent of all those things. Missing parts replacement, completely independent. Then the workflows, obviously, there is a bit less to fix if we remove the amount, if we remove a certain number of OLTs and ONUs, but in the end, there is still the major part of the work is still there, right? Connectivity between the lab and AWS, completely independent from the number of OLTs and ONUs. DNS, DHCP, and NTP, completely independent. ONOS controller, completely independent. Aggregation switch upgraded, completely independent. So reducing the number here doesn't change the context by a lot, right?
Yeah. Okay, and that is the final set of works we need to do. Okay, go and prepare your offer according to this time. That's what I can say. The limited version of this work needs to be done is that we said that we can limit, we take the AWS out, we limit the number of ONS OLTs. If this makes any change on your offer, and we also will remove this nightly testing activity needs to be activated item also. If this makes any change in your offer, then okay. If it does not, then again okay. Your offer will be taken to the board and they will give the decision.
So yeah, what are the big ticket items here then, in your point of view? What are the big things that are costing the money that we can look at addressing?
So one of the biggest points here is installation, startup, shutdown, recovery processes are documented, stable, and repeatable. Currently, we have a completely unmanaged infrastructure, right? All of those things have been installed years and years ago. All of the engineers have left, and nobody really knows how to manage them, how to get them back into shape, right? And this is talking from the lowest level of the servers themselves. Some of them have to be replaced. Some of them have to be just documented. Some of them have to be checked because they're just not on or something. And then the operating system on top of them, the Kubernetes cluster on top of them, the network configuration, the provisioning system, all of those things that you need because you run the pipelines on top of them need to be running. And it doesn't matter if you run 1 or 1 million pipelines, these baseline things need to be running. Otherwise, you cannot build the rest of the system on top of them. And the points at the lower part here, DNS, DHCP, the ONOS controller, the aggregation switch, stuff like that, this is also quite some work because all of this needs to be integrated into the pipeline configuration. So the pipelines dynamically reconfigure certain parts here, and the whole system needs to be able to deal with this reconfiguration without breaking or without exposing certain parts. So the big part of the offer is getting the lab at the DT facilities back into a state where we can run reliable tests on top of them. And if the tests fail, we know that they failed because what we wanted to test wasn't working, and not because any of the underlying pieces is broken or currently not accessible. Because that's what we have been seeing, right? We need to rerun certain tests because the DHCP server on the other side was maybe currently not handing out addresses, or the management interface of the OLT was not reachable. So we're not testing VOLTHA at the moment, but we're actually testing and running into issues about the underlying infrastructure. And that needs to be fixed. And that's a lot of work because that has not been worked on for a very long time.
But can you do anything without that installation, startup, shutdown, recovery processes documented, stable and repeatable, even if you have to do manual stuff? Or is that something that you must do first?
We need to do this first. Otherwise, we will never get to a point where we can reliably run stuff on top of it.
Okay, understood.
So if I might chime in, so Jan, I heard you. On the other hand, it's also great that you have this understanding of the nuts and bolts already in the system from your previous work. So I would suppose, and that is the great opportunity here, nobody says it has to be rebuilt exactly like it was. So if there is an approach that allows making a fresh cluster build and leaving out some of the components, even an owner's controller for an aggregation switch, if nobody actually needs to dynamically manage those VLANs or whatever stuff there. How about a fresh build? Is that an opportunity? We are not limited here by thinking, right? And nothing has to be looking like it was 5 years ago. So having you heard like all of this and you understood where the issue is, can we actually make things a little slimmer here and leaner and fresher?
So I can obviously also write an offer for a completely fresh build of this whole thing, but with the current situation and looking at the last year, I'm not convinced I really like to do that, because the issue so much hasn't been about the exact technical things here or how to approach this, but it's usually about the budget is not big enough to cover the work. And if we're still talking about budget, as we have talked about before, then a new cluster is not an option, because that will also not be in the budget. So I can save some time and not write the offer, right? So the question is there enough budget to actually get this to working or not?
So I think that's the point here. So we are not nailed down to a technical solution. If the experts say that a fresh install is better, is more efficient, go for it. If it's more efficient to fix what is there, then let's do that. The point is, let's do what is most efficient and find a way to do that.
Having a fresh installation, it would be a good idea, I suppose, because most of the problems are because of making the configuration. So the first thing is these configuration items are not documented. So you have to discover what is this configuration, what are those configuration kinds of things. It takes lots of time. So the testing configuration could be started from scratch. The other thing is, so we have the robot tests in hand. I think they are still working if you have the right infrastructure and if you have the right configuration. We in Netsia, we tried that before. We downloaded the robot test and tried to run in the infrastructure, but the biggest issue was making that configuration again, like creating new RGs, creating the configuration of the ONUs, configuration of the DHCP server, configuration of the BNG server. Those kinds of things takes lots of time. So it might be a good idea to start from the scratch. Also, I think it can help, like last week my suggestion was maybe we don't have this VPN connection between the AWS and the Berlin lab. So we can isolate the nightly test from the hardware test, and we can have a different Jenkins server running on the Berlin lab. So if somebody needs a new hardware test or start a hardware test, he or she can open a new Jenkins page and start working directly on the Berlin lab. So we can remove one of the complexities, because this VPN connection was also a headache before. It takes days to make it up again, as far as I remember.
Why do we need that VPN connection, Serkant?
As far as I know, the Jenkins servers are run on the AWS, and also like the software also runs on the AWS, and it connects to the Berlin lab, if I am not mistaken. Maybe
Yeah,
Jen
so
can
the
answer later.
connection, so the connection here is needed to like link the necessary pieces of infrastructure between AWS and the physical lab. So maybe I can quickly add something to this. I think I also read the chat here, and a lot of people are super thrilled now about the idea of like, let's just start fresh and reinstall everything. It will be so much easier. I've heard this like so many times, and I love this idea, right? So you just start fresh, everything is clean, and all of the old problems are gone. Until you then start doing the same things that you wanted to do before by actually running the pipelines and stuff, and then you, for some reason, have 90% of the same problems that you had before, because you're trying to do the same things. Because what we're not doing here is building a hello world example, but we're actually trying to build an infrastructure that is quite complex out of all of the different OLTs, ONUs, different configuration interfaces, and all of those things. So the offer that we send and the point that you have here are already including a basic reinstallation of all of the components, upgrading them and stuff like that, but are not including all of the, which you have to do either way, right? Doesn't matter if you rebuild fresh or if you just like try to do it on the same infrastructure. But what is not included in these things, and what we would definitely need to add if we rebuild fresh, is the complete design process of how do we actually make it better. Because otherwise there is no point in building a fresh infrastructure if you're not fixing things that were broken before.
Yeah, and is it possible to take a snapshot of this AWS and install it locally?
I don't get the question. What do you mean?
So we're saying that the VPN is needed to get a connectivity to an infrastructure that runs in AWS somewhere. But
that's the Jenkins mostly, right? So the Jenkins is the one that controls the pipelines.
Sure.
And then there's some additional things where I guess you do not want to expose a lot of the interfaces from the infrastructure at the DT facilities, because I mean, a lot of them have like default passwords and stuff like that, right? So they're all like configured for internal usage, and please never allow anybody access to them.
So the question was, can we take a snapshot of all the software that is running in AWS somewhere in the world that needs VPN and install it locally?
Francisco, I don't think VPN is a big problem here. I mean,
well, I just said that it was. So
no.
Okay.
So we can install stuff locally, but you still need the underlying infrastructure to. I mean, we can obviously move the Jenkins from AWS to the DT facilities, but in the end, that doesn't really solve anything.
Yeah.
Okay, I just heard VPN being a massive issue, and now it isn't.
No, it's not.
VPN is an issue. I mean, it's a very simple configuration, I guess, not a big problem. And currently it's in place. I mean, we only about the VPN. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jan. We only want to take it onto the new server to form a new infrastructure or infrastructure server.
Exactly.
And be sure that it's sustainable. That's all.
Yeah. So the current gateway that establishes this VPN connection is a desktop computer with a broken networking card. Where we already like switched the cards and adapted the configuration and stuff like that, but the configuration itself is still like not really stable, I would say. There's a bunch of additional guards in place that keep it somehow up. But we talked last year, I talked with Manuel here about like some proper gateway and some upstream connection, also talked with the other guys at DT, how we can connect it to the infrastructure and how the uplink. And there is an infrastructure service that was ordered, and we can connect that. We can use that as the gateway, configure the VPN on top of that. And this is not like a massive thing to do. It's like, I think in the offer that we send you, it's another like 2 weeks basically to get all of those things connected, documented, synchronized with the AWS connection, and automated to a point where if it crashes and burns, you can set it up again, because that's a very critical point of infrastructure in the end.
But then from the last year, I remember that it took a long time to reconfigure this VPN thing. And now you are saying that now it is in better hands and it is better configured. And if something happens, if some problem occurs with the VPN connection, you are saying that this time it can be easily fixed, right?
So last year, the biggest part was that there was no access at all to the server. So I basically had to use some tricks to get onto the server itself, because nobody even remembered the password or had a key to get onto that server. So that took some time to figure that part out. And then the configuration on it was a wild mixture of some bird configuration plus some strong swan, everything manually and only partially working and throwing a lot of errors at me. And then the other side on the AWS was also like partially disconnected, throwing errors because of all the labs not connected anymore. So it took some time to go through all of these issues and figure out what is the actual error and what can be ignored. So we fixed it to a point where the connection was stable. We also needed to replace some physical things on the way from the physical gateway at the DT facilities up to the uplink. So that's we did that together with the DT folks. That took some time. Some of these things are done now, and we have a vague idea how this is supposed to work. So I guess this time we should be able to basically reinstall a new server, connect the new server, put the needed software on top of it, put the configuration, credential, all of these materials on top of them, establish the connection, document all of these processes. And as said, we would do it in a way so that you can also do that. So we would not just run everything manually, but we basically use Ansible for everything. So everything would be done with Ansible. So in case it would explode and burn, because it is a critical piece of infrastructure, you should be able to just recreate that without our help.
I see. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I think that identifies one of the touch points on the other side, since the Linux Foundation taking over from the previous ONF admin and IT. So that includes this control about this, since DT, you could keep calling it DT, is not a DT lab. This is a Linux Foundation broadband lab that is in its own shell, its own island, and has its own internal network. So it's
but the upstream connection is provided by DT. That's what I'm referring to as DT.
Is, invisible to all of you, and the community actually and their representatives get onto this infrastructure directly to this island. You have blind eyes and you get through to this right to the rack there, which is dedicated to LF broadband. So that's the important touch point. Is on the other side, the VPN on the virtual infrastructure on AWS, and I think the Linux Foundation team is on this call, so that's great. So in that regard, it's I think all about documentation and making sure that things fit to each other. But I think that is granted, right, by this VPN update which you suggested, Jan.
Yeah, exactly. So both sides need to be synced, and that's something that we have included in the offer. As said, all of the stuff that we have discussed, we estimated with 2 weeks. And while discussing, I think we should probably go to a bit higher amount, because that's now thinking about it, it sounds like a bit more work. But yeah.
I don't see that, since things have been working before, right? And so I think it's about the question, what is in AWS? And that is taken care of by the Linux Foundation, to my understanding.
Yeah,
But
the things that to be done on AWS is taken care by Linux Foundation. Only the things that needs to be done on Berlin Lab will be done by BISDN. If a synchronization needed, I mean, if you during your these efforts you need something to be changed on AWS side, we need to request it from Linux Foundation.
So what is the plan once the contract between the BISDN and LF is finished? So who will maintain the Berlin lab then?
It's
The
another
LF? Another issue.
Okay, we're over time, so I have a few items on TST, like putting the names of the pipelines that needs to be get green, and the decision about the OLTs and ONUs we had. So going with Zyxel first, if we cannot get support to go to Radisys and limit it with 2 ONUs. I'll add this to the document that we have. And on the other hand, I'm not sure about the other actions, Are you going to give another offer for, doing it scratch again or not?
I mean, I really don't have a feeling that this will change a lot, right? Because like as said, from all sides, what I've been hearing is there is no budget for it. And offering again and again for something where like there is no budget, there is no big point. I mean, if you agree that there is a certain amount of budget that you want to spend, I can try to see how we can offer something in this dimension. But if it's just not enough to cover the work, then yeah, I don't know. And as said, like a fresh installation
that's not
would
the ask,
definitely not be cheaper.
No, that's not the ask. The ask is, given what you've heard there and the dependencies, the one OLT, whatever it is, we need you to provide a final offer that you're happy with. Forget about the budget. Manuel, myself, and the others will take care of that budget discussion. So that's the ask. But I think you also need to list any assumptions that you have as part of that final offer.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you gave an offer, a final offer, but this call is for the questions you have. If you have any,
Yeah, that's all good, and I totally appreciate that.
That you have in your mind, so that if you need any change in your offer or anything else, so you can do it. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate the input. I will definitely include the list of pipelines and that you like mentioned and the OLTs, and then I can basically send you the offer again. And yeah, I've added a bunch of criteria. I mean, you probably saw it, right? There's already a bunch of acceptance criteria in this offer. I'll add some more. I hope that the other acceptance criteria align with what you had in mind, and then I really hope that we can move this forward.
Yes.
Thank you, Jan.
As well. Okay. Anything else? So this will be all for today's meeting, and we will continue.
Yeah, so here I think you and the TST had an action to provide the list of the pipelines, right? I don't know how many there are, but I think that was one thing that you need, Jan.
Yeah, I think Mahir and I will continue that offline via email.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Sorry, Mahir.
And if I may just add one. So I know we're over time, but if there are any further chances to reduce the scope, Mahir and also TST members and experts, let's make that happen. For example, in the chat, I see Abhilash supported the idea of reconsidering ONOS. Is it really needed? So let's not stick to the past, but look forward to how can we operate this efficiently, right? And what do we really need? Yeah?
The-
We
like-
don't need a beautiful setup. We need something that complies to the basic needs of the community for release testing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm open to all of that. Yeah, of course, we don't need to stick to the old ones, but if I mean, the problem is if we decide here to change this ONOS now, and we need to if we go to remove that, then yeah, need to update the offer again. So this
Yeah,
will
that's why I'm
again
saying
and again and again and again. So some of these things needs to be done when we start to work on the items, and we if decide there we can do it at that time. So I know that it's hard for Yen then fix, yeah, I mean put it into this offer and do it with the budget that he had that's also hard, but both sides need to have some flexibility on working on that items.
I hear you, Mahir, but also from from the perspective of again board and budget, right? We need to be efficient, please. So yeah, I understand there needs to be some room for leeway, but as much as we can clarify, and as much as we can detail and reduce the scope, if you can tell give here as acceptance criteria, reconsider honors and build a simpler solution if possible. That's better than saying we build honors in the same way it was. So let's find a way.
But we have already done that, right? So Mano, we have like in the offer that we send, there is like this aggregation switch and this honors. There is already a definition of reinstall and upgrade that, and either like continue in this way or replace it with another OpenFlow capable network operating and stuff. So all of that is already included in the offer, and like allows the TST then, once we start working, to decide, do we want to stick with this owner solution, or do we want to go a bit into a different direction? And none of those things will like suddenly completely change the amount of work that needs to be done there.
Yeah, that's the issue. I mean, I'm not, in my perspective, I'm not sure if I remove this item, it will bring more effort to you or less. Removing ONOS controller and going to a static configuration on switch, you may come with extra budget for this or extra effort for this. I don't know, removing it is diminish the size of the overall, increase its size. So that's why I'm saying that we can together decide on that on the way. So if you come with an idea that it's better to remove this ONOS, it takes more time and effort to maintain this. Instead of it, we can do it manually, and this can be done easily and maintainable, etc. Then we can discuss on that and take the action accordingly. On the other hand, Jan, if you have in these items, if you have any how can I say, any suggestions to limit or the effort, or decrease the amount of effort that needed, or that would be better, then please provide us with your feedback so we can change the context accordingly.
Yeah, so I think we have really like already invested quite a lot of time to like from our initial offer to cut the cost to an absolute minimum. I think Jochen has done quite a lot of work to like define those different phases, grab out all of the documentation, the user-facing part, and like really strip down the whole offer to an absolute minimum and to the maximum efficiency in steps. So I really don't think like, and as I said, I think Hagen also like mentioned that in some other discussions. There is, we can't offer lower than that in the end. There is just we can define the criteria in more detail, but we cannot cut the cost in half. That will just not happen. And if that is the ask, that is also fine, right? I mean, if you say the budget is only half of what you're asking, just tell us, and then we're done with that, and then we're not like iterating over something that you don't want to like buy.
No, I think we're getting to the decision time here, Jan. So, you know, from my point of view, what would be good is if installation, startup, shutdown, whatever is the first thing that has to be had, separate that into a single cost. That's what you do first, without any distractions on BOM or anything else. That's what you do first, and the cost is X, and the rest goes into the rest, basically.
Yeah, that's done in the offer that we sent. There's like single cost positions for all of them. There's a timeline for all of them. There's 2 different options, like split by you can contract us for a reduced scope. So there's all of those things are in there, because like I listened to what you told me over the last meetings. So
do you have a need to iterate through that once more, or do you think your current offer is it, basically?
I think I'm fine. I mean, we can add like these things that we discussed today, because that's why I asked for them. I think it will be good to ask the exact workflow pipeline, so that you can also be sure that we're addressing your exact needs, and that we're not like stopping before all of them are done. But in the end, this is more or less it, right? There's not like suddenly,
You're not going to reduce it by half, right? That's what I'm hearing. And then the next question is, would it be good for you, would there be an idea for you to present to us again? A special meeting, not wait a week. You tell me when you can get that iteration done. And then I think, from my point of view, Manuel, I would welcome you to present that proposal to the TST and to ourselves, rather than firing a document and then there's misunderstanding. So 2 questions. When do you think you can get that back?
As soon as I have the list from Mahir with the pipelines and the OLT models, I'm happy to present that. I mean, I already sent the offer out like end of last week. So now it's just like adding some more details to it. But yeah.
Perfect. All right. Okay, Mahir, the ball is in your court.
Okay, then I'm going to close the call.
Crack on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys and girls. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks.